Hello, everyone. Hello. It is a pleasure. It is such a pleasure for me to be here once again with another YouTube Live. It is a pleasure for me to be here, and I am welcoming Sherice Mohammed to the Team Racing YouTube Live. It is a pleasure to have you here, Sherice. How are you?
I am well. Thank you so much again for having me. This was what a wonderful surprise when I heard
Of
when I got your
course,
tweet.
of course. I'm so glad. I'm so glad to have you here. I'm so glad to have you here. And we just want to talk a little bit about GoGo and the rich history and culture and legacy it has in DC, and
Yes.
how that's how we move forward in the future, and how this rich culture and legacy can be showcased to the world at large. So I'm so glad to have you here with me to talk about that. But we're also going through you know a very unprecedented time. So tell me, how has it been for you, during this pandemic so far?
Actually, I do work from home, so that's a blessing in itself. And hopefully, we can talk more about policies and what's transpired regarding COVID-19 and what will the workforce look like in the District of Columbia. So for me, it's working from home, thankfully. And my daughter is a junior at, well, she's now a rising senior at McKinley Tech High School. So managing her workload and making sure that I'm like a head of school now. I have to make sure she's on her assignments and making sure that
Mm-hmm.
she's following up with her teachers and making sure the assignments are done. So that's pretty much my life on a day-to-day basis, and of course it's music in between.
Music in between. Now, talking about music, I know so many people in Washington, not just in DC too, but in this area, the DMV area, they've been talking about the beat goes on TV1 before it came on and since it's been on. And you've been one of those people talking before it, during it, after it, and everything. Tell me, tell me, how do you feel about the documentary? What was your takeaway? How did it make you feel? What was that like?
I mean, I have to give kudos to Kathy Hughes. I think she was the executive producer for the Beat Don't Stop TV1. This was long anticipated, waiting for this type of documentary on the impacts of go-go music. I mean, I could not wait. I
Mm.
mean, I had my DVR ready. I have been watching it, because it was also a trip down memory lane, to be very
Yeah.
honest with you. Looking at go-go at its zenith,
Mm-hmm.
and that was in the early to mid 80s. I mean, that's when go-go like hit a pinnacle, and
Yeah.
it has continued into the 2000s. And so we've watched it shift and modify and change is good. We have just different music aspects of go-go. Everything is not the same. You've got different bands, you've got different compositions, you have different sounds, and even my guys on the mic, ladies on the mic. So you've got a number of things that really differentiate one band from the other.
Definitely. And so you're from this area, right? And so
Yeah.
you know the history of it. Tell me about what it was like, growing up. Tell me about, your experience with go-go in this city.
Well, I remember first hearing go-go on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
WOL at that time was on H Street, 4th and H Street. It was a little hub on the right-hand side if you were going towards the uh, Hip Hop Bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And right now that you see a Union Station, but it used to be a little hub right there on H Street, 4th and H. And we could actually look in the window to see which DJ was working at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so growing up in DC, it was just, for me, it was wonderful. I mean, we had our issues as a city. At that time, we were, the crime was an issue, public safety was an issue. But in the midst of all of that, there was a culture. There was a culture of hardworking people, families. And for young people, we had a number of programs that really shed light on government. It shed light on arts and culture. And we took advantage of those programs. And so it really helped to shape us into the people that we've become.
Oh, wow, lovely. And speaking of, shaping a city and shaping that culture, many right now feel that that culture and the city, there's a change that's occurring, and it's not necessarily a change that the people that live here and are from here want. There's a change coming in. People are trying to do many changes, you know, and I'm speaking about gentrification, and I'm speaking about people trying to change the culture of DC to something that it is not. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, DC has always been somewhat of a transient city. It's a place where you have a number of colleges and universities, both Ivy League and HBCUs. That has always been. We've had Howard University, we've had George Washington University, Georgetown, George Mason over in Virginia. So DC is one of those cities where people may have become introduced to the city via their education pursuits, going to college, and they decided to stay. You have some that are coming because of the federal government and city government. Federal government brings a lot of people from all over the world that come here because we have both the House and the Senate, and we have, of course, the Oval Office here. So it's always been a transient city. But as the shifts and changes in our government have taken place, we've seen a number of people come through, and some have chosen to stay, and some have gone back to their prospective cities. So it's always been that. Now, gentrification on the other piece, DC's gentrification is a small part of a bigger process. And we see this happen in all of your metropolis throughout the country: Detroit, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Houston, Atlanta. So everyone sees the pattern. That is, you know, raise in property tax, the price of or cost of living in the different cities, and you see the uptick in that. And then, of course, you see the removal of people who have lived in those areas, are not able to continue to manage those budgets and to remain in those areas, and they're pushed out into whatever suburban areas that are nearby. So gentrification has been an issue for over 20 years now. But again, that is something that we have been addressing. And I did not mention earlier in our personal private conversation, but I'm a former ANC commissioner. So we understand how these things systematically occur, and it comes from the seats of government. There's a decision that's made, and then there you begin to see the policies that align to that end. And so gentrification is certainly something that just doesn't just happen. It is planned, it is executed, and it takes place.
And, you know, speaking of gentrification, I think, especially because it is something that is even, it feels heightened, especially now. There is a push to protect the culture, to protect the music, to protect all of those things that makes DC, you know, special, especially for, you know, people that were born here. They were born and raised here. You know what I mean? And GoGo is a huge part of that. GoGo is a massive part of that. And, you know, they've been changing. You know, you and I spoke about this right there at Florida and 7th when these people came and they were trying to stop the GoGo music. And there's a Howard, you know, I went to Howard. That music is a part of the era. It's a part of that. And so with these changes, it is very understandable why you know, there's this push to hold on to the culture and to amplify the culture. So I'm really happy that, you know, the beat don't stop came through, you know what I mean? And so tell me about the documentary as well. Was there anything that you wanted them to put in? Was there anything that they left out with that documentary?
I personally love the documentary. Now, here, what I would call missed opportunities. I would have loved to have heard from some of the other go-go bands. I would have loved to have heard from James Funk. I would have loved to have heard from some of the former bands. We heard from EU, we heard from a number of Rare Essence members, but I would have liked to have heard from some other of the bands, Junkyard, Hot Cold Sweat. I would have liked to have heard some people who formerly worked with Chuck Brown, and some of the producers, some of the behind the scenes people from the go-go scene, because that was not just about who you saw on stage. It was about who was behind the stage, who were the managers, who were the financiers. They mentioned GoGo Live, which I think was capturing lightning in a bottle. I mean, a slate at the Capitol Center. I know a lot of people, young people now, don't know anything about the Capitol Center, but that was the place. If you were coming after, of course, second only to RFK Stadium, but Capitol Center had a lot of our concerts. And so for GoGo Live, I was one of the thousands that was there that night. And it was all go-go bands, nobody but go-go bands, and one rap artist, and he was a go-go rapper, and that was DC Scorpio. But everybody on the bill was go-go, and it had never been done before. And the place was packed, and people were turned away. Wow. People had to literally stand outside in the parking lot because the place, the whole venue was sold out. So that gives you a glimpse of the go-go, and I'm telling you, it was more than just DC people. It was DC, Virginia, Maryland, neighboring areas, even North Carolina. I met people that night that had driven up from North Carolina to hear the music and to attend the concert. So I loved the documentary. I just saw that there were some missed opportunities that hopefully it will spark a part two, a Beat Don't Stop part two, because there's so much. 2 hours is not enough, and you're not counting the commercial time. So I think it was pretty good. I liked it. I really liked what I heard, and it was a lot of intertwining of how go-go, what it was like in the 80s, what it was like during when we were the murder capital of the world, unfortunately. But in the middle of that, we had this music that just drove people. And I would have liked to have heard more on the fusion of go-go and hip hop, because there was an intersect. There was a solid intersect. I mean, as far as, you know, in the late 70s, early 80s, I mean, Curtis Blow heard it and he jumped right on it. There was no mention of Curtis Blow. There was no mention of Salt and Pepper. It was Kid and Play. It was a number of artists. I mean, even DJs too. DJ Clark Kent, Biz Markie was always down here. I think Biz Markie lives out in Maryland now. So these are people from New York who love the DC sound, the go-go sound, and partnered. I mean, Jill Scott, I would have loved to have heard from Jill Scott, because she loves Chuck Brown, and she's performed and recorded with Chuck Brown. I would have loved to have heard from her. But again, maybe this would be an opportunity to bring some more people to the table and formulate and continue with maybe a part two.
Yes, I agree. And, you know, that's good. I like that you mentioned that, because it speaks to the future of go-go and the future of this culture, and, you know, making it even more worldwide so many more people can be touched and inspired and entertained and, you know, all of that from go-go. And speaking of that, tell me, what do you think is the future for go-go? What do you think is the future of this culture? Where would you like to see it go?
I would love to, well, public gatherings are really questionable at this point in light of COVID-19. But just like we saw on Instagram, we see the Versus thing where you know, you had Teddy Riley.
Wow,
I would really like to see like the old school go-go and maybe, you know, EU versus Trouble Funk, two different sounds. I'd like to see Belladonna, and you could pull all of the girls from Pleasure. You know, let's see a Versus, because Pleasure was the first all-female go-go band back in the 80s. So there's a precedent and there's a lineage here. And I want to also speak to the musicianship. I mean, I would have loved to have heard how go-go went global. And I know that Sugar Bear and EU partnered with Spike Lee, and it put the butt on the line, did the song The Butt, and that went out. But I also wanted to shout out Juju House, who played, and some of the other members of EU. I don't have all of their names, but they were on a Grace Jones cut, Slave to the Rhythm. When you hear that, especially if you got the 12-inch single, you hear go-go in its finest. And then I look at Grace Jones perform in Sweden or in London, and I'm looking at all of these different musicians, not one of color, but you heard that go-go sound. So somebody taught them, and you heard that. So if you Google Grace Jones, Slave to the Rhythm, and you listen to that, somebody was here.
Someone was here. I agree. And listen, that is, I think that is the best takeaway from that. Somebody was here, is here, and will continue to be here. I want to thank you so much for joining me today, Sherice. It has been a pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank
Thank
you.
you, thank you. And
All
before I
right.
let you go, could you
Mhm.
just let our audience know how they can follow you and keep up with you?
Oh, please do, by all means. I'm on Instagram and I'm also on Twitter, Ms. MZ Sherice, Sherice. And I'm on Twitter and on Instagram. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye. And to
Peace,
our
peace.
viewers, thank you for watching.